Hello, and thank you for joining me for this Wilfred Owen Dulce Decorum Est review for unseen poetry. All right, so you'll see there in your show notes in the Google Drive that's at the bottom of this video, you'll see a link to this unseen poetry kind of like revision grid, right? And it's got your question 27.1 there at the bottom left in Dulce Decorum Est. How does the poet present the speaker's experience of war? And then you have the comparison there of 27.2, which is in both Dulce Decorum Est and Attack. The speakers describe their experiences of war. What are the similarities or differences between the ways the poets present these experiences? So we're going to come back to this question in a moment after we've read through the poem. But I always recommend reading the poem 3 times over. Once just for pleasure, once again, for the second time you go through it, you annotate it. I use T-slime, which is what's the significance of the title, the structure, the language, the imagery, what is the meaning of the poem, and E is for the effect or the emotions that you're left with. So as you see there, when you go through it, you're going to have to annotate this in some detail. So you're going to be looking distinctly for some very important pieces. Mostly the use of metaphor, the use of simile, the use of personification, language, including alliteration, and the effects of those things. So you'll see that there's a point quotation analysis box there in the middle. And while that's quite good for your notes, you do want to say what the effect is and what is the implied meaning as well. So without further ado, we're going to get to the point here of reading Dulce Decorum Est to you to get you a little starter there on the 27.1 in Dulce Decorum Est. So 27.1. So as I read it, try to follow along and annotate for how the poet presents the speaker's experiences of war. Okay? Dulce Decorum Est by Wilfred Owen. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep, many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshod. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas, gas, quick boys, an ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes in thick green light, as under a green sea I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the whites of his eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face, like a devil's sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud, of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, Dulce Decorum Est, pro patria amore. All right, that's the first reading. Now I want you to read it over to yourselves 2 more times to get into the rhythm of annotating your poem. So read it out loud. Poems are meant to be read out loud, and annotate it. Remember that T-slime. What does the title mean? What do you notice about structure, language, imagery, meaning, and effect? What do you get from it? Good. Take some time now and finish that off yourselves. Great. All right, welcome back. So now I ended this with a little quotation here that we have from Ernest Hemingway. And he fought in the First World War, drove an ambulance in Italy and saw immense amounts of suffering. And he actually has this quote that's a direct response to the end of Wilfred Owen's poem, which in itself is a bit sarcastic. Dulce decorum est pro patria amore, which means it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. Hemingway, as a response to that, he says, they wrote in the old days that it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country, but in modern war, There is nothing sweet nor fitting in your dying. You will die like a dog for no good reason. Now, with Hemingway's experience, as well as what we know about modern warfare and the mechanized warfare that was realized in the First World War, there's definitely disillusionment, a move away from the romantic view of war, and really just seeing the human suffering on the ground. So Ernest Hemingway, having lived it, can give some great insight into that. Maybe we can bring that into some of the context explanations in your poem analysis. But right now, we're going to move over to your sheet, which you already have with you, hopefully. All right, there it is. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at that sheet itself and what it means. So there on the left-hand column, you have Dulce Decorum Est. Under it, you have the 27.1 24-mark question in Dulce Decorum Est. How does the poet present the speaker's experience of war? You've got your secondary poem on the right-hand side, Attack, and then it's a comparison question that is worth 8 marks. So we're going to focus today on 27.1. We're going to focus on the first question in unseen poetry, which gives you the most bang for your buck. Now I'm going to give you a little point about title, a little point about structure, language, imagery, meaning, and effect, and you can obviously add to these and expand them to fit your particular response. But as we go through Dulce Decorum Est, I am hit immediately with the title, Dulce et Decorum Est. It's strange, isn't it? It's written in Latin, Latin being a classical language. Maybe Wilfred Owen's almost putting this outside of the reach of regular people. Maybe he just wants the educated class to know his true meaning. And maybe those are the people that can make the difference anyway. So maybe this is actually a poem for people in power. But as soon as we start reading it, we go back to modern English and we have bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge. We get a double-barreled simile there, don't we? Like old beggars, coughing like hags. Who are these people? These are your soldiers. These are your proud and valiant British men who've gone off to wage war in France against Germany. But they're not seen that way. They're seen as hags, beggars. He's giving you a very interesting image there. So what does that image suggest to you? What does it imply? What meaning could Owen be getting at? Are we all just the same underneath? And the uniform doesn't matter, the purpose doesn't matter? See how you can tie that into your own understanding of context in World War I. Let's go down a little bit further. So, actually, sorry, I went out of routine there, out of step, out of order, because I went title. Now I gotta go to structure. So I gave you an imagery one a little bit early. So structure. Let's look at structure. We can immediately look at it. Sacks, sludge, backs, trudge, boots, blind, hoots, behind. We've got an A-B rhyme scheme. So there's some sort of order to this. So is he reflecting that there's some sort of order or regime to the day of fighting? Wake up, fight, eat, sleep in mud, wake up, fight. Is there some sort of regime and order? It does seem to be quite boring, this first stanza, doesn't it? They're just walking, they're limping, their feet hurt, and they're walking back to their distant rest. But then we have a change. So the second stanza is introduced with gas, gas, quick boys, all exclamation marks, by the way. So your use of language as well as your use of structure, starting a second stanza to talk about this gas attack. And then it stands out. But then we get a two-line stanza. So another thing you can point out in terms of structure. In all my dreams before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. We'll get to the sounds of those words in language, but we get a whole stanza to itself. So it's as though this particular event is very significant. What does that suggest? What does that imply that this third stanza stands by itself? We good? We're up to the T. Let's get to language. Language is brilliant in this. There's a lot of comparison language. There's some hyperbole, but mostly it's the use of repetitive sounds. He does this very well, Wilfred Owen. So let's go back to guttering, choking, drowning. If you read that to yourself, it's almost as though you are guttering, choking, drowning. And we see it again later on. So if you go into that fourth stanza, look down that fourth stanza, and we'll go 5 lines down. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, almost with gargling, we get an onomatopoeia, don't we? We get the sound of it. We can experience it. What is this suggesting? What is Owen trying to do? Is he trying to bring you into the boots of himself? Is he trying to make you empathize with this scene? And how effective is that? So what's the meaning? What's the key word? Is it jolt? Is it blood? Is it gargling? Is it blood being the key word there that we can get our word level analysis of? I don't know. It's just you. Also, you can point out other words like innocent, incurable. We've got the devil himself. We've got this invocation of pure evil. All right, so I've given you some language. I've given you imagery already, but let's go back into this. Just a little bit more for imagery. So we've got like old beggars, like hags, drunk with fatigue. Nice metaphor there. Let's go into that second stanza. As under a green sea, I saw him drowning. Is he really drowning? Well, he does drown in his own blood, I guess, if this is a chlorine gas attack, which is quite brutal, but as under a green sea. That might be very significant, almost as though you can't see things. Everything is just a little bit altered in one way or another, but as under a green sea, it could talk about the alteration of your vision through war, etc. What is actually being suggested there? And then finally, I'll give you in the fourth stanza, like a devil's sick of sin, a hanging face like a devil's sick of sin. So we make a comparison to this dead man to a devil who is actually sick of sin. So there's an extended meaning there. Amidst this war where there's so much violence and death, how much sin is actually occurring, and could the devil truly become sick of that? Now we get to meaning here. This is an anti-war poem in itself, because it shows you the reality of war. It doesn't big it up. It isn't trying to gloss over anything. What it does so effectively is it presents to you the mundane, the boringness of being a soldier at the time in that first stanza, but then we get the excitement, the ecstasy of fumbling, trying to survive, that moment where you feel most alive because you're closest to death, and then the aftermath. That person, flung, you can also use that word flung in your language assessment. What do we fling onto a cart? A human being? Or refuse, rubbish? Those types of things. So remember, it's the experiences of war that we're focusing in for this question. So we're going through all those experiences of war. So the meaning, it's an anti-war poem. It's giving you the reality of war. The effect and the emotions. We might feel sympathy. We might empathize with these soldiers. We might feel, at the end, a bit angry because it's an old lie. Think about the significance of that wording, the old lie, Dulce Decorum est pro patria more. That it's sweet and fitting to die for your country. Well, it's a lie. Is the whole war a lie? So as I've talked through that for you, we can go through point, quotation, analysis. When you're actually writing your assessment, remember the pedal approach. Point, evidence, what technique is used. So are we talking about similes, metaphors, stanzas, line breaks, onomatopoeia, alliteration, superlatives? Let's go back to structure for a bit. You've got caesura, you've got enjambment, you've got extended lines, line breaks, internal rhymes, rhyme itself. Think about these types of things and how these ideas break, right? And of course, going back to structure, you can tell that there's that ABA rhyme scheme throughout, okay? So, obviously you can develop your own meanings, but then what you'll do is you'll go on to your second poem and the comparison question, which is where you'll have to use all of your comparative language. But right now, we're going to stop this video. You're going to go off, answer the question yourself, really get involved, have a personal response, because that's where you're going to get those really high grades. What is your personal response, and how do you think the writer, in this case Wilfred Owen, wanted you to respond? What is being implied? What is being suggested? What message does he have? What is he displaying about war and his experiences of war? Always come back to the language of the question as you're answering it. So good luck. Everything in the show notes there. Thank you very much for listening, and we will be back with more videos in the future.